Ladies and gentlemen, we got.
I've earned everything I've got.
Yep, good.
Mr. Gorbachev.
You didn't build that.
Yep, good.
Tear down this wall.
Your favorite president?
Tear down this wall.
I can see Russia from my house. Pokemon go to the polls.
Ask not. Yep, good. Okay. What your country.
He did stay well alive.
Hello!
Hello! And welcome back to
A chicken in every pod.
AKA Schoolhouse Schlock. Am I right?
Yep, That's right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for subscribing, of course. This, as we talked about last week, is a humorous podcast about American politics, history. We're the king and queen of context. We're here to put context in place for all the crazy stuff that's going on in this world. I'm Kyle McCormick. I am a graduate student, history buff, politics wonk. My beautiful co-host here,
Lucia Fasano, ear candy, side piece, main squeeze, comedian, musician, writer, actor.
and my betrothed.
Betrothed.
Yes.
And queen of context, king of context. And we're so excited to be back. Thank you to everybody, friends, strangers, foes who have listened to episode 1, which was about court packing. We put a YouTube version too, where you can watch with some images that go along with it, a la PowerPoint. So there's some really fun like surprises and Easter eggs in there. Chicken eggs, to be precise. So we really appreciate everybody sharing and supporting, especially with the quarantine. There's some friends from far away that we really miss. So
Yeah, it's like I get to babble at my friends.
yeah, and you all just have to
You just have to listen.
It's great.
We love it. So before we get into today's subject, let's rap a little bit about what's been going on last week. You know, because it's Friday, we're loving it. Gonna get down on Friday. Obviously, the big news from the last week is the debates.
Okay, how does a podcast started by 2 white people sitting in their bedroom go on to be a #1 podcast?
Keep going.
Okay, I'm not going to keep going.
Okay.
So we watched the debate last night. It was, Trump is back from having the Rona.
Trump's back, baby.
He's back. He's blustier than ever. And I feel like the fact that he is well, I'll put that in quotes.
Relatively well.
Relatively well. Yeah, this is part of our Trump Watch.
Trump
is Trump
Watch.
alive? He is. Anyway, part of it, to me, it really feels like he either knew he had the Rona before the first debate with Biden, or was that second debate with Biden?
This is the second debate.
Okay. But before that debate with Biden, he either knew he had it, or he had just had it for a couple days and didn't know. Because, like, timeline-wise, to the idea that he's, like, all better, to me, it's like he had it longer than they told us.
Or they've got the cure.
Yeah, they have the cure.
And they're just giving it to Chris Christie.
They didn't give it to Herman Cain.
Well, they're racist.
Yeah,
they only give it to sick white people.
Yeah, and so, I personally feel that Joe Biden should have just been like, I'm not going to debate you. What the heck? Like, man, like, you basically tried to kill me in the first one by being a human bomb.
Yeah, you did biological warfare at me at the first one.
Yeah, so I really feel like they just should have pulled a Trump, honestly, shown a power move of like, I'm not even gonna debate you.
Yeah.
Which is sort of what he did for the second one by being like, let's not be in person, let's do virtual, and then Trump was like, no cyber.
No cyber. Biden has less to lose than Trump with all of this. So whatever Biden does, it's whatever, because he's leading by like 10 points in the polls. Trump is the one that needed this. And he'll never admit it because he's too strong, he's too powerful. Trump needed this debate to be a big deal.
Yeah.
To quote Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. in 2010, a big fucking deal.
Speaking of Trump and Trump impressions, this is a strong recommendation from the pod.
Yes.
Please Google or search on Twitter, Instagram, Trump Weird Al.
Yeah.
Because there's this comedian that does an incredible, we'll link it, on
Yeah, we'll link it.
Twitter or Facebook.
Scooby Don, I've also seen this phrase used to describe his
so
version.
he does the best Trump impression we've ever heard.
Incredible.
One is Trump ranting about Weird Al. What's one of the lines from that?
An American original, Weird Al. Yeah.
And then the Scooby-Doo one, he's like, he's talking about how Scooby-Doo doesn't actually contribute.
They call him Scooby, but he doesn't do.
Scooby, but he doesn't do.
They call him Scooby, but he doesn't do.
So please,
great.
if you want some fun in this world, check
It's
it
all we
out.
can do.
So back to the debate.
So Trump needed this to go well because Trump is behind. He's lagging in every poll, basically. I mean, so next week, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about the Electoral College. And one of the things we're going to talk about is the fact that the Electoral College has a Republican bias. It is a built-in bias right now.
Inherently?
Yes, to the Republican Party.
Or right now, or just always? We'll talk about it then.
Right now, but long term.
Okay.
It's not like it's written in the rules that the GOP will win, but the GOP coalition that exists and probably will exist for the foreseeable future is one that has a bias.
Hey, I thought colleges were supposed to be liberal. Anyway, continue.
It has a bunch of a Marxist bias. But so basically, the slant of the Electoral College means that for a Democrat to win, they have to lead nationally by like 2 or 3 points. It's not enough for it just to be a slight lead. And Biden's leading by like 10 points on average nationally.
Wow.
It would take, at this point, for Trump to win, not impossible. It would take a much bigger polling error than what we saw in 2016.
So he needed the debate. He couldn't.
He needed to turn things around. He needed to right the ship.
He needed a big media moment for his base and to get more excitement. And I think he was really hoping, and all these ones, he's really watching Biden to watch his stutter. And when it comes to Stuttergate, I will go on the record as saying that, yes, I believe Joe has a stutter. And yes, I've also, believed that I think it's clear when you watch his old debates and him a couple years ago, like it's clear there is some cognitive decline. And, there have been a lot of flubs that are pretty unacceptable. And then others where it's like, he's stuttering or he's just mixing it up. But it's still like, you don't necessarily have dementia but you could still be an old man.
Yeah, I think he's an old guy who's just not as sharp as he used to be. I don't think that necessarily means that his brain is Swiss cheese, but, he has good days and bad days.
So it's a shame that that right now our two candidates are both elderly men with some modicum of Swiss cheese in their brains. And Trump has Cheese Whiz or Velveeta, I guess. So, that's not great. But I, to me, his performances lately, I'm able to tell it's a stutter. And you can see that Trump is ready to jump on everything.
You get the strong impression that he has been told in no uncertain terms, do not bring up his stutter, but he wants to really bad.
Yeah, and he wants to attack Biden for frailty. And all of these head-to-heads between them, Biden keeps surpassing expectations, and you can tell that Trump is just fuming. And that's why he keeps attacking Hunter, which is the other sort of news item that came up in the debate and has been going on this
The
past
Hunter
week.
Biden laptop, Giuliani, Borat situation.
We're going to watch Borat 2 at the end of the night, so we don't have our Borat takes too much.
We don't have our Borat takes at all. But we're excited for it. Big fans of the original Borat.
Very nice. We like.
My wife, she like. So with the Hunter stuff,
What about Gatherer stuff?
What about Gatherer stuff?
Thank you.
So the thing with the Hunter stuff, basically the story is that the New York Post had an article about supposedly a laptop was found in Delaware with all these emails and texts and photos of Hunter Biden. And they leaked the email or the text showing that Joe Biden loves his son, which was, very emotional. The photos of Hunter just being an addict, and which is very sad, very personal. The scandal they're trying to hit is in the emails, which they're saying shows that that Biden and Hunter were involved in double dealing with China, Ukraine, whatever.
Even though Trump loves deals, especially double.
He loves the art of the deal.
Yeah.
But basically, there's, as far as we can tell, there's not a lot to this. hasn't been fully investigated, I guess, but the Wall Street Journal actually just did a full investigation into all the paperwork involved and says there's no evidence that Biden's involved at all. In whatever they're talking about, there's no evidence that Biden's involved at all. Yeah, so they've litigated the bereavement thing over and over and over again. It's what Trump was impeached about. Obviously, it's not a great look, but as far as we can tell, Biden's not involved. I don't understand, except beyond... The only explanation that makes sense to me as for why this is the closing argument of Trump's on-life support re-election campaign, that Hunter Biden is his closing argument. The only thing that makes sense to me, which I said to Luch during the debate, is his campaign's just too online. I don't think they realize that most people don't care about this, which you saw in the debate. The debate was all Trump talking about his problems, talking about Hunter Biden, and it was all Joe trying to talk about Americans' problems.
Yeah, and as we talked about in private, the, attacking Joe for his son's addiction or his son's crimes, how is that going to resonate with Americans that are dealing with the opioid crisis and parents who, there's so many conservative parents whose kids are drug addicts that they're like, the last thing they'd want is to be blamed for it.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting...
And nor should they be.
Yeah, and so it's a really interesting play for him, especially also to be attacking the nepotism and corruption when he is the king of nepotism and corruption.
Yeah, that's the thing, is there's nothing that Trump
really
is accusing
weird.
Biden of, or his family of, that Trump and his family don't do times 10.
Yeah, and so they're trying to have a, Comey papers, Comey emails, revelation in this last act.
Very directly.
And it just feels like this is a shallow imitation.
Yeah, I don't see how it's going to stick, especially considering that the states that Trump most needs to hold on to, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, these are some of the states most ravaged by the opioid crisis.
Yeah.
And he's out here having Rudy Giuliani try to pillory Joe Biden because his kid's an addict. I don't get it. I mean, Frank Luntz, who's a longtime GOP pollster, went off on an interview recently about how it's political malpractice to be focusing on Hunter this much. They need to be talking about what they're going to do for people that need help.
Yeah.
Because we're in a crisis, a national crisis.
Some highlights of the debate, I feel, were, Biden bringing up the kids in cages thing and Trump very clearly stating that the kids are treated tremendously well and all this stuff. And it's like, I've never been more disgusted, at one of Trump's statements than that one. Where
Inhuman.
It's just like,
utterly inhuman.
Kids, besides just how disgusting it is to separate the kids from their parents or keep them detained, the idea that these kids who are dying, they're
kids have
dying,
died.
They're getting missing, they're going into trafficking, they're getting these diseases, they're 11-year-old kids are taking care of 8-year-old kids in there. It's a huge stain on our history. And what's gross is that Biden says this is messed up, and Trump goes, who built the cages? You did. And it's one of those things where it's like, you can't say that when you don't give a shit.
Yeah.
It does, you can't.
Trump's
he keeps calling
points.
Biden out on corruption, calling Biden out on, different things that he and Obama did, but it's like, it's not like Trump. There's a difference between the left criticizing Biden or Bernie criticizing Biden's work because Bernie wants to, offer an alternative. It's like Trump is just like, who
That's
built the cages? Also, thanks for the cages.
Whenever Trump has something even approaching a point about Biden, it never matters because Trump's just trying to score points. He does not give a shit. He's just trying to win. So it's never, he maneuvers to wherever he can in order to try to own Biden. So honestly, don't be a sucker for it. Don't fall for that. He doesn't care. He just wants to make Biden look like an idiot. And the truth about the cages, which are an absolute stain on the Obama administration's legacy and should be seen as, in fact, Obama's entire immigration policy was very problematic during his whole time. First of all, Joe Biden is not Barack Obama. They had public disagreements behind the scenes a lot. So it's already kind of unfair to assume that Biden bears responsibility for the Obama administration's actions, and full responsibility. But second, although those cages were built in the Obama administration and they were used to house children, there is a significant moral difference between the child policies of the Obama and Trump administrations, which is that the Obama administration when they separated children, it was in response, ironically, to what Trump said he was doing, which is kids who were brought over alone or by coyotes and basically didn't have anywhere to go. So they were kept in a group facility so that they weren't just released or lost. The Trump administration, we know this from stuff that they've released since 2017, had a specific policy of taking family units that have crossed the border, separating the children from the parents, housing the children there, doing whatever with the parents, specifically to prevent people from emigrating because they didn't want to go through that. That is a moral universe apart in terms of policy making. So that's a distinction Biden can't make on the stage. I understand that because part of that is acknowledging that they did use those cages for kids.
Yeah.
But don't be played for a sucker by Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He does not have your best interest in mind. He doesn't have anybody's best interest in mind.
Yeah, and also it's hilarious that Trump is always making jokes and then, and he's many times has basically compared himself to Lincoln or even said he's better than Lincoln.
Yeah.
And so it was really funny last night in the debate, Trump compares himself to Lincoln and then Biden's like, Lincoln over here. And Trump short-circuited him. He was like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean?
I didn't say I was Lincoln. I said I was the best president for black people since Lincoln.
And Biden's like,
I'm making fun of that you said that. Like, I'm not saying that you actually think you're Lincoln. I'm making fun of that you said something stupid.
It's kind of similar to the 2016 Hillary and Trump calling him a puppet for Russia or China.
No puppet.
And he's like, no puppet, you're the puppet. It's just really funny how he really has no idea how to respond to people.
Yeah. The thing about Donald Trump
throwing
is that,
his shit back at him.
Yeah. Donald Trump actually sucks at this. I think this is something that people need to remember. He tapped into a nerve because he's a solid salesman.
Yeah, he's talented at manipulating.
Yeah. But he actually sucks at politics. He's not good at this, which we can all tell. We all see it happen. Everybody knows it. Many people are saying this. We love to see it. We're going to talk more about the election next week because we're going to have our Electoral College episode and we're going to get into the mechanics of it. And we'll provide the link and all the details later, but we will be doing an election night live stream where we're going to be seeing the results come in. We're going to be analyzing them as they come in. We're going to be holding your hand through this very stressful night.
Yeah, you don't have to go it alone.
That's right.
We will be there for you.
We will provide a safe space.
Yes, there will be a Twitch chat room.
Yeah, it's going to be on Twitch.
You can talk, respond to it. So we will be there holding your hand.
That's right, and holding each other's hand. Mm-hmm. So we'll provide all the details for that next week, but rest assured we're going to get into the election. For now, though, let's get into today's topic, this week's topic. I can't wait. Luch, what are we talking about?
Raised garden beds?
No. That's on our other show. That's on A Garden in Every Bed.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're talking about gerrymandering.
Gerrymandering!
As well as the census.
That's right.
And a more charitable term for gerrymandering, which is... Redistricting.
Yeah, they're not quite synonymous, but we'll get into it.
Yeah.
So, gerrymandering, census, redistricting, all of this. Basically, we're going to be talking about the ways that the core political units of America, in a geographical and population sense, are determined, and what that means. So, we hear about gerrymandering a lot. Right, Luch?
Yeah.
Do you hear about gerrymandering a lot, would you say?
I do in my sleep.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go.
You just hear whispers of gerrymander. So as far as you know, what is gerrymandering?
Gerrymandering is, I want to say like a conservative, but like it's redistricting areas of a state so that you have a certain type of voters that are mostly in your district by going like around the neighborhoods, like being like, this is the section of this county that I'm gonna govern or whatever. And then like it's like how there's certain local assembly people or Congress people you can vote for, but your neighbor might not get to vote for them because they're suddenly out of the district. And gerrymandering is doing that for political gains.
Yeah, that's pretty much right. A pithy definition I once heard is that usually in a democracy, a voter chooses their government. When you gerrymander, a government is choosing its voters. So,
That's a gerrymander.
that's a gerrymander. So we're going to get into it more, but you're exactly right. Gerrymandering is the process of drawing districts specifically for political gain.
And charmandering is when you're a little lizard that breathes fire and goes, char, char.
That's exactly right. Charmandering is when you want to pick a starter Pokemon that's going to give you a lot of trouble at the first 2 gyms just to prove that you can.
Or charmandering is like when you got your lady in bed and she lights you on fire.
That's right. That's right. But before we get too much into gerrymandering, I want to talk about the process of redistricting in general.
Okay.
And that brings us to the census.
Sense8.
That brings us to Netflix's underrated show, Sense8. So, what do you know about the census? You're the every woman. Let's get into it.
I am the every woman. So I've filled out a couple censuses in my time, a couple censi. I feel like a census is similar to what you fill out when you're, at the doctor's office or anything else. You tell them about, your sexual history. No, just kidding. You say what ethnicity or race you are, how many people live in your household, your age, location, whatever. It's ASL. I think that's about it, right?
Yeah, but what is it? What is a census? What's it for?
So it's so the government knows a general idea and statistics about the people in that region.
All over the country, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, all over the country.
Yeah. And it's done every 10 years.
Okay.
Every 10 years, there's a new census, and it's on the even-numbered years. So there's a census this year, 2020. I hope that you all filled out a census form.
But why is that important? Why can't I just throw it out? Why can't I throw it in the fire when I'm charmandering?
When my husband and I are charmandering in the evening. Because if you do not fill out your census form, now, the easy way to say is the government doesn't know you exist, but that's a weird way of putting it. The reality is, if you don't fill out your census form, the next year, when your state legislature is going to sit down and redraw the congressional districts in your area, they are not going to have the input that you exist for it, which means you will not be effectively represented in the next congressional setup for the next 10 years. Because the importance of the census politically, to make sure that you get counted, to make sure that your voice is heard, and that you're taken seriously, is every 10 years, the state legislatures, mostly state legislatures, some states do it differently,
Hey,
mostly...
Isn't it every 10 years you get to become a Pokemon trainer?
That's
When
exactly
you're
right.
turned 10.
That's
Okay.
exactly right. Every 10 years, a new generation of Pokemon trainers
And a new Slayer
begins.
is born. Okay.
Every 10 years, the state legislatures in every state, mostly, redraw the congressional districts. Now, the congressional districts are, of course, the organization of the state for which each district has a congressman.
And by redraw, you mean like they've got the map of that area.
Yeah.
And they basically draw like a line, a squiggle around the shape.
Well, it doesn't have to be any particular shape.
Uh-huh.
But the idea is that you take a state like California. Based on its population, it has a certain number of congressional seats. So, like, for example, Wyoming has 1 congressional seat for the entire state. They don't have enough people. California has 53.
So the idea for that is it's equal voice. Why should one, is it congressman?
Yeah.
Why should one congressman have as much power for a place with not that many people?
Exactly.
Versus California has such a diversity and huge amount of people, it needs more representation.
Congress people are Democratic. A small d Democratic. Congress people all represent a fixed number of constituents. So if your state has a lot of people, it's going to have a lot of Congress people. And that's why, like, Los Angeles has many Congress people. Whereas the Central Valley has, like, 3. And so the districts that those people represent have to have boundaries, right? You have to decide where does this person represent? Who votes for this person, right? Because it doesn't make any sense for me to vote for San Francisco's Congress people. They're not their constituent. They don't represent my interests in Congress. Brad Sherman would represent our interests in Congress.
Yeah, San Francisco, their interests are a big bridge, and here our interests are a big minion.
That's That's exactly
We're different.
exactly correct.
Okay.
So, in order to determine the size and structure of the congressional districts and how many each state gets, because sometimes you lose a few, in order to determine the number of congressional districts a state has, where the congressional districts are, all of that, you use the census. Every 10 years, you track who's moving where, what kind of people, etc., etc. So the importance is to make sure that you and your community, especially, don't get overlooked. Now, the Trump administration wanted to add a question about citizenship on the census this year. Basically asking, are you a U.S. citizen? Technically, this is, I guess, something they could have done, right? Because it's not illegal to not be a U.S. citizen. But the intention was to scare Latino people from answering at all. Why does this matter? If Latino people aren't counted on the census, they're not going to be represented.
If you are an undocumented citizen, like, if I were undocumented, it wouldn't even occur to me to answer the census. Or,
but you should.
Or if a poll is calling me,
Yeah.
would not want to answer.
But you should, because
so how many actually are? I wonder.
Not enough.
Not enough.
Yeah, not enough. Latino communities and black communities are often underrepresented in censuses. And what that leads to...
It should just be on Facebook.
Yeah. Well, there's problems with security for that.
No, I know.
What that leads to is huge groups of people that are not being counted for congressional seats. You could have whole neighborhoods that could have 2 or 3 Congress people that have 1 because they didn't follow the census.
Yeah.
The federal government doesn't know that they're there, effectively. So
that's a thing that it's good to check in with your friends and family. Not only did you vote, but also did you do the census?
yeah, make sure they did it, because you want to make sure that you're represented in Congress and in your state legislature. An example of the way that redistricting after 10 years after the census might become complicated coming up is there's been concerns that AOC's seat might stop existing in Congress, which would not be politically motivated. It would be because that region has more or less people than it did before. And so it either needs to be combined with a different district or it needs to become 2 districts. I think the issue is that it would have to be combined with another district, which is why hers would just go away instead of being split into 2, which is what happened here in LA with Brad Sherman and Henry Waxman. Their districts, I believe, got combined, and so they had to run against each other.
So AOC would still be able to run for Congress, but it would have to be in a different area?
No, it would have
Or
to be against
like
a different
close-
person with a slightly different constituency. It would be basically her area plus a bunch of others.
Okay.
Which is why there's been talk about her primarying Chuck Schumer instead in the Senate.
Ooh. That's delicious.
A delicious idea. But so that's the kind of thing that comes out of the census and out of redistricting. So,
Historically,
yeah.
wise, another cool thing about the census and why it's a great thing to do is a lot of the times when I'm looking up stuff either about ancestors or relatives or if I'm doing research about people that used to be alive, sometimes I'll go to newspapers.com or sometimes I'll go on
Ancestry.com.
Ancestry or those different websites, and you can find out in 1902 blah blah was living, like your great grandpa was living in the same house as had 3 kids, and you might be like, I didn't know that he had other kids.
Yeah.
And then you can look that up, and so it's a really great thing for people in the future to have our data now.
And it becomes public, I believe, after 70 years, 60 or 70 years. So don't worry about getting doxxed from this. It's information that your grandchildren will be able to access. Great-grandchildren. But yeah, that's a great point. I use that as well. It's a great resource. So the census is important. Make sure that you're counted, and make sure that when your state government redraws your districts, that your needs and your family's needs are taken into account, because otherwise they won't be. Which leads us to redistricting, which is the core mechanism that we're discussing here. Mm-hmm. Like we talked about last week with the Supreme Court, the Constitution does not say how many Supreme Court justices there has to be, right? It says the same thing about Congress. The House of Representatives, no limit on how many there are. It just needs to represent how many people are in the United States.
And the House of Representatives equals Congress.
When we talk about Congress, we usually are talking about the House of Representatives. Technically, Congress is both the House of Representatives and the Senate. The Senate, it does say how many, which is 2 per state. Every state gets 2 senators, no matter what. We'll have to do a whole episode on the Senate. That's a whole other thing.
The Galactic Senate.
That's exactly right. Districting doesn't matter for the Senate, because the Senate is statewide. Congress, House of Representatives, they represent specific districts.
So
in
that's
the state.
why sometimes they're referred to as Rep. Ocasio-Cortez or Rep.
Yes.
Whatever.
Technically, their title is Representative Ocasio-Cortez.
Okay.
Versus Senator Schumer.
Mm-hmm.
But Congressperson is also fine. You wouldn't say Congressperson Schumer. It's weird. It's just, whatever. Semantics. But so, a couple decades ago, they put a cap on how many representatives there could be in Congress. Mm-hmm. It was 435. Done. Cap on it. The reason they did this was because they were concerned that there would just become too many.
Yeah.
But of course, this also means that it's not quite as representative as it ought to be. There has been people saying that we should dramatically broaden the House because there's many, 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 many more people in this country than there were.
There's a great documentary about AOC's run, Paula Jean Swearingen's run,
Cori Bush's first run. Now successful.
Who's the woman who lost her daughter?
Amy Vilela.
All great women that you can look up their current campaigns and make a donation.
Yeah.
Even
Cori
though they're in a
Bush.
different state than you.
Yeah.
Or they might not be running right now, but running again next time. It's a great documentary on Netflix. If you want to learn about like AOC, but learn about these other women who are just as much superstars, and they're just regular people. And there's organizations like Justice Dems or like Our Revolution, but then there's also Brand New Congress, which is a group that they're like, we need a brand new Congress. A lot of these people are ancient.
Yeah.
A lot
There's
of
no term limits.
A lot
for
of them
Congress.
don't represent. Yeah. I mean, is it? Yeah. Is Mitch McConnell? He's Speaker, right?
No, Mitch McConnell is the Senate Majority Leader.
So he's running for re-election as a senator.
Yes.
Are there term limits as senators? No.
Yeah, he's been there since the 80s.
So there's a lot of people that really like. They should respectfully
they should get out of here.
bow out so we can have some new...
Dianne Feinstein.
So you should definitely check out and support groups like Brand New Congress.
Yes. Justice Democrats.
And maybe you'll want to end up running for something.
Because this is the key. By the way, the movie's called Knock Down the House. It's great. The thing about the House of Representatives is that it's supposed to be representative. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be people from your community.
Oh, it's not an ironic name?
No, it's not actually. So people from your community representing you in Congress. And this is why redistricting is important. Because somebody has to decide what counts as your community and what doesn't. Mm-hmm. From what pool of people do you get to choose as your congressional representative? And what are the boundaries of what they represent? Yeah,
like weird guy down the street that wears a snake around his arms. Is he part of your community?
He's got my vote.
Okay.
Joe Exotic. Got my vote. So, who decides, though? This is the question that we're talking about here, right? Who decides how and why? What district is what? So, like, we live, for example, in California's 30th district. Who decides what the 30th district is? How do they decide it? And why? That's the question that we're looking at here.
Yeah.
Right? That's where gerrymandering and redistricting comes in. Mm. So, based on the Senate results, every 10 years, the state legislature, and that is our local state House and Senate, although in California, it's called the Assembly. It's not the House. But most of their states have a state House of Representatives and a state Senate.
Oh.
And then the governor is basically the president. They basically mimic the same structure. That we have a state Supreme Court, we have the whole deal.
So is a state senator lesser than the regular senator?
Yes.
What? Okay.
No, what's my question?
Well, it's confusing.
Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, like, do people often work their way up from state senator to grown-up senator?
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically...
But there's no state congressman. There's just
No, there is.
assembly people.
No,
Okay.
well, it's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where it's confusing. Because most states have state representatives. They have a state house of representatives. California, New York, I think one or two others. Nebraska doesn't have a Senate and a House. They have their own whole thing. But California and New York have state assemblies instead of houses of representatives. Okay. So when somebody's running for state assembly, they're basically running for state house to be a representative for the state. The difference is that the federal legislature, regular senator, regular congressperson, they are in charge of federal policy. They're running the federal government. State house, state senator are only running state affairs. For example, one of the most famous state senators in America is Nina Turner. She was a state senator in Ohio. So she was a powerful politician in Ohio, but could not affect policy anywhere else. Nothing to do with anywhere else. If she became an Ohio senator, a senator from Ohio, then she would be controlling parts of the federal government, like Bernie Sanders, a senator from Vermont. And that controls everybody. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and Bernie started out as mayor. And then,
Yes, Bernie was a mayor first. Yeah. He was a mayor, and then he was a congressman. And then he was a senator.
Then he was a senator.
Yeah.
Big fans of Nina Turner on the show.
Yeah, love Nina.
Check her out. Check out her speeches. Support her.
She's a podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Hello Somebody, I believe it's called.
Oh, yay. Okay, great. Big fan.
She just had John Kasich on. People were mad at her. Everyone, get over it. So, the state legislature, that is the House, State House, State Senate, they redraw the districts based on the census data. The idea is that this is supposed to be a fair process to ensure that the updated population and migration patterns within a state are represented in Congress. Because otherwise you get situations where a place that was a booming city 50 years ago, but is a ghost town now, would still have the same number of representatives. Whereas that's not how it should be, right? The representatives should follow the people. The shapes of these is where we run into problems. Because
the shape of water.
The shape of water. Because when one party runs the entire state legislature, there's nothing incentivizing them from drawing the borders of districts to empower their own party and disempower the other. And this is how you end up with a state like Michigan, which is a majority Democratic state that mostly has Republican congressmen, because their Republican legislature redrew their district boundaries in 2010. And they basically drew a big circle around Detroit, so that every other district was full of white people. And that's not really how it's supposed to be. I'll share it online, and I showed you Luch. Texas' 2nd district, the home of Dan Crenshaw. He's a representative there, eye patch guy.
Dan Crenshaw, yeah, he was on SNL. He has an eye patch.
Yeah, that is basically a weird, like Cocopelli-shaped squiggle around downtown Houston. Downtown Houston, where Beyonce is from, is a city that's very diverse, has a large black community, a large Latino community. And the Texas GOP basically drew a district around the city so that they could get another seat for a Republican.
That gerrymandering's got me looking so crazy right now.
And that's basically the problem, right? Now, solutions, who knows? There have been people that have said, just do a grid, right? Just make a simple
That's
grid.
what comes to mind for me is like, just...
But the problem with that is that populations aren't laid out on a grid.
Yeah.
And you can end up with a situation where the entire city of Los Angeles, 4.4 million people, I believe, at the last count. Well, we'll find out after the census exactly how many. Around 4 million people. Could have exactly as many representatives in Congress as all of Tulare County in the Central Valley. A place that my great-great-grandparents lived, which I know because of the 1920 census.
Boom!
Boom! And a place you've probably heard of, Luch, because of their county seat, Visalia, and their beloved ransacker.
Oh boy, why do we have so many serial killers? We have as many serial killers as we got Congress people.
There was lead in the paint back in the day. Messed up all their brains. So that's where the problem with a grid comes in, is that it's not accounting for population. I think probably the only real answer is to have a neutral third party. Not third party as in like libertarians or whatever, but as in a disinterested party that is appointed by somebody. I don't know.
I mean, so every 10 years is when the state representatives have to figure this all out.
Yes.
So what's interesting, Kyle and I both worked on, meaning Kyle worked in a formal fashion on a congressional campaign out here, challenging Brad Sherman, and on a local assembly campaign. And so, like, I was privy to a lot of it, and I would help out with social media and volunteering, door knocking, and going to local Democrat meetings and stuff where people would talk. Yeah. And what really stuck out to me was not just on, the federal or level, or like, Joe Biden's flying all over the country to campaign, is that assembly people have to bust their asses, or assembly candidates have to spend so much of their own money, have to spend so much time on the phone, fundraising, campaigning, going to all these different meetings, and the incumbents are doing the same thing. All these politicians in America are busy campaigning when they're supposed to be doing their job.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I have very little faith in the idea that these state representatives have any time to be actually working on the census or actually getting involved in the community, because even just what I experienced, it's all photo ops, it's all phone calls with lobbyists and special interest groups, and it's all, and fundraisers and bullshit.
Yeah.
So it's like, when are you actually, it's like, when is Christy Smith, if she, she's running for re-election.
She's running for regular election.
Or she's running for regular election after being assembly person. Yeah. So she's spending her last year as assembly person running for Congress.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guarantee she's not spending that time doing any tangible work. Just like how, Obama running for re-election or Trump running for re-election. Yeah. They're not governing at all.
Well, we have these campaign seasons that are so long. Yeah. I mean, in other countries, like I think in the UK, campaign season's like 6 weeks. Like by law, like you're not allowed to really do any advertising. You can go shake hands if you want. They can't stop you from doing that. But you can't really do anything outside of like 6 weeks before the election.
Yeah, and like
our election cycles are like 2 years long.
They're like 2 years long. So people, even before they win, they're planning their next campaign. And then they also, like, because of money in politics, all of their time is spent literally begging for money or
constant fundraising.
Yeah.
Constantly.
And so that's just, it's another thing that doesn't give me a lot of faith. Like, I don't have a lot of faith in the census. I don't have a lot of faith in our representatives actually getting to be hands-on in any tangible way.
Well, when it comes to redistricting, when it comes to public, financing campaigns, I definitely think that we need an independent third party, probably bipartisan, commission to oversee redistricting, not state legislatures. And obviously, we need not just money out of politics in a vague sense. We just need publicly funded elections. Yeah. We just need elections that aren't driven by private money at all.
What's publicly funded elections? What would that entail?
It would entail that basically any qualified candidate who's on the ballot would receive a certain stipend from the government, and that would be their campaign fund.
Yeah.
And everyone is exactly the same. And so you just use that, whatever it is.
It's just amazing how even on these local races that we worked on, it's like you had, you had candidates that are like self-made, and you have candidates that, have a lot of wealth, and then you have candidates that don't have any wealth, but maybe they have some good connections. And it's like everyone's money is just fighting each other. And so it's like one of the local candidates, we saw her speak. She's a nutcase, but she's got a ton of money, so she has posters everywhere, volunteers everywhere. And so it's just watching that, it's like, oh, there's
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So basically, gerrymandering is a big problem. Redistricting is important. The census is important. It's very, very important to make sure that as we continue to form our government every couple of years, every year really, that you are represented and that your community is properly represented in Congress. Vitally important. But there needs to be a way to fix this gerrymandering thing, because again, this has consequences. It makes it increasingly difficult for one party to hold the House. It makes it increasingly difficult for a congressional delegation from a state to represent its people. Here's an example of a really wonky way that this matters. Democrats control the House of Representatives right now, right? That's why Nancy Pelosi is Speaker of the House. Most Congress people are Democrats. Let's say Joe Biden, Donald Trump tie. We'll get into this more next week. Let's say they tie in the Electoral College. What happens? It goes to the House. They have to vote on it. Now you think, bully, there's mostly Democrats in the House. They'll vote for Biden. It's not that simple. Their votes are tallied by each state's congressional delegation, not the individual Congress people. So they basically rerun the election. Each state uses its congressional delegation to vote, and then that state's votes tally it up. There are many states, Michigan's one that I mentioned, but there are others, that could easily choose Joe Biden and have Democrat majorities, but because of gerrymandering, their congressional districts are mostly Republicans. And so even if there are more Democrats in the House than Republicans, in this scenario, Donald Trump would still win.
So this is a really good example of why local politics is even more important. Because I feel like when we say, support local politics, that's what your real focus
It's not just about
be.
potholes. It filters up. There's consequences at the federal level for this stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that definitely there should be awareness raised about that.
Yeah.
Because it still feels like, oh, well, our assembly person or even like our governor, what really, how are they really impacting things in other states or on federal level?
And so we're talking about how important the congressional makeup is per state. And who decides the congressional makeup per state? Your state legislature, your local representative. It's vitally important.
So, if I remember, does gerrymandering have its roots in sort of Jim Crow era?
No.
Okay.
No, it does not. Gerrymandering, well, it's existed as long as representative democracy has existed. Mm-hmm. The term, though, comes from a man named Elbridge Gerry. That's right. Gerry. I don't actually know why the pronunciation changed, but that happens all the time, actually. You want some trivia? You interested in some trivia?
Please.
A great example of pronunciation changing dramatically. The word Caesar. Caesar. Julius Caesar, right? Would not have been pronounced Caesar in classical Latin. The pronunciation of Caesar in classical Latin would be Kaiser.
Yeah, the Kaiser.
And that's where we get Kaiser from. It's called Caesar because of how it how French and Spanish developed out of Latin.
Caesar.
Basically, Cesar. But Kaiser is closer to how it would have been pronounced. But we just don't say it that way. Gaius Julius Caesar would have been Caius Julius Caesar in classical Latin. G as well would not have been pronounced G. Tsar is also where we get Tsar from Caesar as well.
So we had gerrymandering, it turned into gerrymandering.
Yeah, it probably didn't turn into gerrymandering because of the evolution of French and Spanish and Portuguese from Latin. But yeah. Now, Elbridge Gerry. Who was he? Who's this motherfuck?
I don't know.
Well, he was the Vice President of the United States.
What?
That's right. For a few months.
Few months?
And then he kicked the bucket.
So they had to get another. He was the William Henry Harrison.
Yeah, he was the William Henry Harrison Vice Presidents. He was a regular Spiro Agnew. He was James Madison's Vice President.
Oh.
So very, very early. And he was a politician from Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And he kicked off gerrymandering as a term because he redrew the map of Boston to make sure that the Democrats and Republicans would get more support than the Federalists in the state. And then he became the vice president, and then he died. And now we all mispronounce his name.
What a dick. Thanks, Gary.
Elbridge Gerry.
Thanks, Elbridge.
But the practice itself, look, the reality of gerrymandering is that the practice is not purely American, and it's not, I mean, it's partisan, but it's not a partisan phenomenon. Democrats gerrymander too, right?
We can gerrymander too.
We can gerrymander too.
Just as good as them.
That's right. Like, imagine, for example, most Democrats are popular in urban areas. Imagine drawing a district so that... Okay, I'm going to use California geography. And listeners, if you're not familiar with it, you're just going to have to come along with me. Mm-hmm. Most of South LA is heavily Democratic. That's like where Karen Bass is the Christian representative of. Most of Orange County is fairly conservative. Well, not so much anymore, but it used to be. So imagine drawing your district, and you decide to snake your district that's currently in like El Segundo and Linwood, that area, and you decide to snake down and like grab Anaheim too, an area that would otherwise be conservative, but you've absorbed it into a blue district that has more Democrats than Republicans, and you do that all the way around Orange County. Every blue district, you take a bit of a conservative suburb and you put it into the blue district, and you do it all the way around. You could basically destroy the Republican Party. That's something to think about. But so that's just
I need
an
a
example.
giant snake.
Yeah, and of course the opposite is what they did in Houston, which is you take a conservative suburb, you draw the map around that, and then you snake it into the city. You grab a little bit of the city that would otherwise be blue, and now it has to go along with the Republicans out in the suburbs, and you do that all the way around, and you can break the city that way. So that's how basically the urban-suburban divide happens with gerrymandering, and that's how it could go either way. The important thing is that our democracy works, and our representatives represent us. So gerrymandering needs to be done away with. It needs to have an impartial, independent, as impartial as possible, which is not very, but as possible, independent third-party organization doing it. And that's gerrymandering.
Which is why we're releasing our own ice cream, Ben and Gerrymandering.
Ben and Gary.
Ben and Gary's.
Luch,
Yeah.
what's the census?
The census is a little piece of paper that arrives at your door every 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like a father that left for cigarettes
Yeah.
and then came back.
That's right. And that sends you $5 for your birthday.
Send you $5 for your birthday. And it gets the basic information about your household to get geographic data so that it can redistrict and draw up the needs of the area.
That's right.
Did I pass?
You did pass. That is a census. Yeah, it's a way for the government to count its population.
Yes.
Every 10 years. What is redistricting?
Redistricting is when your representatives, your state representatives, get together for a fun little sleepover and figure out how they're going to divide up the districts and how many Congress people this area gets, what area they're representing.
Yeah, they basically redraw the congressional map.
Yeah.
Based on the census data.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And what is gerrymandering?
Gerrymandering is a nefarious use of shapes and geometry where politicians redistrict in a way that would benefit their political needs based on the demographics of those regions.
Yeah, based on the results of the census.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Wow.
You nailed it, 100%. Do you have any more questions about the census, redistricting, or gerrymandering?
Not really.
You feeling confident?
Yeah, I'm feeling confident to go and
Watch Borat 2?
watch Borat 2, break through the state capitol, kick some ass.
Parody.
Yeah, what if I snuck in the night that they are almost done with the census, and then I take the redistricting, and I take the little maps that they have drawn, and then I redraw them. Like a dick shape.
I don't think that it
And
actually
balls.
occurs at a sleepover in one night.
Okay. Do they do it by hand with pens and crayons?
Almost definitely not.
Okay. Do you think they do like a digital, like 3D?
No, I think they just do like shitty DOS line maps.
Yeah, it just goes to show also how frustrating it is that so many of our representatives are ancient or out of touch, because it feels like a lot we could use, people in the soft sciences like sociologists and stuff like that, anthropologists. We could use them when it comes to
be on the commission,
interpreting
the independent third-party commission.
Yeah, the independent third-party commission of liberal arts degrees.
Yeah.
It's like they could be interpreting this data in a cool way. And then we have such amazing technology where we really could use computers to make fair districts, I feel. But I feel like the way we do it is probably not like that.
I think you're right.
Another thing about the census, isn't it used also for other types of studies?
Absolutely. It is a broad and comprehensive snapshot of the population of the United States. All kinds of sociological, historical, anthropological studies can be done out of the census. It's hugely important. Otherwise, how do you know how many people there are? Do you know how many people there are?
12?
I don't. You don't. They're not 12.
I don't. So don't fill out your census. Go off the grid.
Yeah, go off the grid.
Grow a big beard.
That's right. Start drinking colloidal silver and convert all of your money into gold Krugerrands and bury them in your backyard.
Hydroxychloroquine.
Take some hydroxychloroquine. Don't wear a mask.
Please.
Whatever you do.
If you just don't. If you have your own gas mask from your prepping, cut a hole in the front.
Yeah. I call them a muzzle.
Yeah.
Because it's the man trying to muzzle
Hold
you.
me down. Don't pack any clothes when you're going off the grid. You don't want to,
Clothes are a communist
blight.
plot. They're a blight.
Yeah. So please, don't fill out your census, because it's how the government tracks you. Instead, link all of your personal data on all of your social media.
Yeah. Don't fill out the census. They're going to track you. Instead, just use Facebook.
Have a fake Instagram, a Finsta.
Like the kids.
We're not going to have an episode about that term, but if you don't know the term Finsta, apparently most people that are young have a fake Instagram, and they use that to post the things they really feel in their heart, the nude pictures they really feel in their heart, the mean things they say about me, the mean things that Kyle's little sisters say about me. Yeah, so it's a great way to have an affair.
Sounds pretty fun.
Yeah, I think a lot of politicians have Finstas.
Ooh, if you can find a politician's Finsta. I mean, you know what? I was going to say send it to me, but the reality is send it to a journalist.
Yeah, please.
Give it to Ken Klippenstein on
great.
Twitter. He's got his Signal open, and he's always looking for scoops. So.
Okay, hypocrite politician corner. Hypocrite politician.
Hypocrite politician.
So, a lot of politicians are huge hypocrites. And a lot of them are, sex fiends with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
A lot of them are like Ed Buck, where they're Democratic donors.
And, basically serial killers?
And basically serial killing gay men in their house. Look him up, Ed Buck. Mm-hmm. He's the Robert Durst of
the California Democratic Party.
Yeah, even though I think Robert Durst is like the Robert Durst of the New York Democratic Party, because I think he was like a donor.
Maybe.
I don't remember. Anyway, he's creepy. Ed Buck. So, a lot of them are also sex hypocrites and sex fiends. Plenty of them are conservatives.
Too true.
That are,
For example, the longest serving Republican Speaker of the House, Denny Hastert, went to jail for pedophilia.
And no one talks about that.
No one talks about it. He's still alive. That was like when 9/11 happened. He was the Speaker of the House. Will
you explain how the Speaker of the House, who turned out to be a child molester, I almost said spoiler alert, trigger warning, how close he was to the presidency? Take us back to that time.
Yeah. 9/11. Crisp Tuesday morning, 2001. Basically, the idea is that the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania was thought to possibly be headed to the White House, the Capitol building. Now, Bush and Cheney weren't both in D.C. that day. Of course, Bush was in Florida. So even if it had hit the Capitol building, Bush wouldn't have died. But
Maybe he would have died of grief.
He probably would have died of grief. But he would
embarrassment.
have choked on that pretzel.
That's the alternate universe, my new book.
I love it.
Alternate history of, yeah.
But if the plan to just destabilize the American government had gone off, if Bush and Cheney had both died that day, the next in line for the presidency is the Speaker of the House. And that is, at the time, was Dennis Hastert.
At the time now, Nancy Pelosi.
At the time now, it's Nancy Pelosi. In between them, John Boehner and Paul Ryan. And Nancy, again, for a bit. But so, yeah, if they had both died...
Negative Nancy.
Yeah. Then Dennis Hastert would have been the president. Dennis Hastert was, just a couple of years ago, technically he was not convicted of child molestation. He was convicted of financial fraud by structuring payments to pay off hush money for the child molestation that he did. So, yeah, he was a football coach or something, like a high school football coach, and was molesting his students. He's the longest running Republican Speaker of the House that has ever served. He's like 12 years or something. The Republicans didn't control the House for a very, very, very long time. That's why the longest running Democratic Speaker of the House was like 25, 30 years. But yeah, so that guy's still alive. That was recent. And nobody talks about this.
Yeah.
Nobody talks.
I'm the only one.
So what were you bringing up?
I was also bringing up
the mean sex freaks.
Fun politician sex names. You have Carlos Danger.
Oh, Carlos Danger's a classic of the genre.
I almost said Harvey Danger. Was Anthony Weiner, which is hilarious that Anthony Weiner needs his own sex alter.
Well, yeah, Tony Weiner is a little too on the nose.
I've got all these texts from Tony Weiner. So Carlos Danger, and then the recent one was Lindsey Graham, famous homophobe that everyone suspected was gay.
Yeah.
We found out that his alter ego is Lady L.
Yeah, Lady L.
That's right. What I'm supposed to be.
You're Lady L.
I'm Lady L.
Apparently, every male, every call boy in DC has seen Lady L.
We've all seen Lady L in our time. So that just,
Parody, non-actionable. We read that somewhere else. I'm just covering our ass.
Okay. So I always like to raise awareness about that.
That's important. Okay, so every episode will have what's in the news, because we're going to be releasing these every Friday, talking about what's in the news the last week before. Trump Watch, is he alive? And the sex freak corner to talk about the sex freaks that we've elected.
Yeah, that's probably not going to be the case. But,
yeah.
But I'm always on the lookout.
Hopefully there's not enough news.
Yeah.
But when there is, we'll be there.
We'll be watching.
We're always watching. We are the Dark Knight.
Nobody cared who we were until we put on our masks.
Nobody cared who I was until I ripped off my mask at Vaughn's and started screaming.
Wow, I feel like I've learned so much about gerrymandering, redistricting, the census, etc. And now I feel even more informed. And I've actually already voted, and I've already filled out the census. Have you voted and or filled out the census?
I voted, and I filled out the census.
Was it fun? Was it a thrill?
It was a thrill. It was a chill. Mm-hmm. I took a spill.
Oh no. You felt and dropped all of your papers in the air.
Exactly,
and they
they all
flew
went
around.
flying.
And then some sexy lady
That's
picked
how we
them
met.
up. And then, last week.
Yeah. It's great. Please, I think the deadline for the census might actually have passed by now. But make sure that you fill out the census, or that somebody in your house did on your behalf, which is allowed. I think actually you're supposed to. Make sure that you vote. If you haven't already voted, just vote.
You just gotta
vote.
Look up your local voter guides that are like made by people cooler than you.
Yeah,
like,
if you're
not
here,
just the New York Times or whatever.
Don't just listen to the failing New York Times.
Don't just listen to the failing, corrupt.
Yeah.
New
Here
York
in Los
Times.
Angeles, I recommend DSA LA's guide is great.
Mm-hmm.
Knock LA's guide is great.
Mm-hmm.
Ground Game LA has a good one. Find your progressive good voter guides, or if you're conservative, please stay home.
Yeah, and
Who
if
needs
you
to
have
vote?
questions about these issues, go to those people's like you don't have to just listen to the voter guide. You can
Yeah.
look up the stuff yourself.
Do
you
your own
can
research.
call and stuff. Do your own research. We gotta stop just making Trump our
our go-to character.
or like person with split personality that like when
Yeah.
they say something uncomfortable,
triggers it.
they just become.
And of course, if you do have any questions that you want me to answer specifically, you can always reach me on Twitter at Kyle_McCormick.
Yeah, if you want some mansplaining.
If you want to get mansplained
for your
too.
manhole, if you want to gerrymander,
That's right.
then go to Kyle.
That's right.
If you want some empowering woman-splaining, then don't call me. Just leave me alone.
Okay, just leave her alone.
So we have been a
chicken in every pod.
And we love you.
And we love you.
You want to learn about the jargon and the sayings of the times. And also there's some things that you're wondering just why. You want to know about the states and the things that make you cry. 'Cause the podcast makes us strong. Subscribe to us forever. Subscribe to us forever. Subscribe to us forever. 'Cause the podcast makes us strong. And maybe if you listen enough and like us too, and leave us a subscription with a positive review, maybe we'll get some sponsors like Audible and Blue Apron, 'cause the podcast makes us strong. Subscribe to us forever. Oh, subscribe to us forever. Subscribe to us forever. 'Cause the podcast makes us strong. You are hungry, you are tired, you are low on your rent. You're wondering why the government's telling you to get bent. We want to explain so we can overthrow them. 'Cause the podcast makes us strong.